All right, so now we're continuing on our series of the profiling framework, which is the 4 pillars that you're going to want to, or skills you're going to need to master in order to do an exceptional active profiling session. Now we're focused again on active profiling because passive profiling is a little easier, right? Like you get the benefit of observing, you're not in the game, you don't have to enlist the other person's cooperation. You just get to watch them, which makes it quite a bit easier. And of course, the better you can do with passive profiling, the more accomplished you're going to be with active profiling because you're going to be building markers. That said, in active profiling, these 4 pillars are going to be, I mean, they're effectively the backbone of everything. So we're going to start with the pillar of rapport. Building rapport is incredibly important in a profiling session, and the reason why is because you have a major challenge that you're in an interview context, all right? An interview context can be very disconcerting to the person that you're interviewing. When are we interviewed? We're interviewed for jobs. We're interviewed in a more casual way when we're on dates. We're interviewed for, situations, or in situations where we might not get something that we want, or somebody might unearth a characteristic that we believe is an inadequacy and within us. So in an interview session, in an active profiling session, a person might have a lot of imprints around interviews that makes them nervous, uncooperative, trying to put their best foot forward, and not being fully authentic. So that's a challenge. And your job, if you do your job right, you're going to be accessing intimate information, not intimate information like secrets, but intimate information as in you're pulling their skull back and looking at their brain directly. And not everybody's super comfortable with that. In fact, there's a lot of people who are protective of that intimate space of what's going on inside their mind. So you're entering a place within them that they don't even have language for, okay? You're entering a space that even their closest friends and family members might not be able to reflect back to them this information about themselves. And that can be very disconcerting. So building rapport is one of the best ways, best tools to get around what can be an otherwise disconcerting process for the person. The 3 components for building rapport are safety. We're going to call them the 3 S's: safety, similarity, and synchronization. Safety, similarity, and synchronization. If you can get these 3 things down, you can build enough rapport in a profiling session to be able to bypass all those defense strategies that people will throw up in order to prevent you from entering a place where there might be dragons. Now, just to let you know, not every person on the planet is going to allow you to be in rapport with them. Not every person on the planet is going to allow you to active profile and be comfortable with it. These are usually the situations where you've been hired to go into a company and profile employees or team members that didn't ask for it, but they're doing it because they were told they have to do it. There is going to be a time period where you run into somebody that you're active profiling, and there's going to be a resistance. And that's okay. Like, not everybody has to be into it. Remember, this is not empirical reality. This is not empirical truth. This is a map. The map is not the territory. This is a way of understanding people. It's not the person themselves. So if a person is very resistant and does not like profiling, if they don't want this component, maybe they're suspicious of profiling, maybe they're suspicious of personality types, maybe they're suspicious of psychology in general, you're probably not going to get very far, and that's okay, all right? Like, profile them that you need, effectively get through what you told the company you would get through. Call those pieces of information. The person will most likely cooperate with you because they believe they have to for their job, even if they're not super happy about it. And don't feel like you have to convince that person that this is a model that's going to save them, all right? If they're not into it, they're not into it, and that's okay. Most people that you active profile are going to be into it. Most people will have asked you. Or you'll be in a situation where you are actually helping somebody get through an issue or a situation, solve a challenge, because you're using this as a tool. So it's not going to come up that often, but when it does, it's okay. For the majority of people, though, it's not really a matter of whether or not you're trying to get around their their massive resistances. You're not trying to like penetrate this, huge brick wall they've put up. For most people, it's just trying to get them in a place where they can reveal their authentic nature to you. They're usually okay being in that situation, but they might not be okay with interviews in general, or they might just be nervous, or they might not want to tell you, their authentic expression. So what rapport does is it can tear down walls, but mostly what it's used for and what it's there for is to make somebody relax, to relax in your presence, to be thoughtful, to really get inside, those you're helping them describe those puzzle pieces to the best of their ability. If they're nervous, they might miss a detail. If they're nervous, they might, describe something differently because of the nervousness themselves. You're trying to get them to a place where they're relaxed enough so that they have no problem hitting all the details of that puzzle piece that they're describing to you. So one of the first things that you do when you create or generate rapport is you create a sense of safety. You're doing what's called securing the perimeter. Now, securing the perimeter, when I first heard of this concept, I heard it in the context of lions. When lions bring down a gazelle or a zebra and the entire, the pride is feasting, right? They're having their meal. There are a lot of scavengers types of animals around that would love to go take that meal from the lions. So what they do is they assign one lion the task of walking around a perimeter to make sure that the other lions can feast in peace. And they take turns, and sometimes it will be a different lion that does that. However, they call that securing the perimeter, which is that everybody can relax and enjoy their meal because there's a scout out there to make sure that nothing's going to interrupt them. And that's your job as a profiler. When you go into an active profiling session, it is your job to secure the perimeter, meaning that everything's going to be okay. You're not going to allow anything negative to interrupt this. And that includes anything negative from within. You're going to make sure that they're safe and their information is safe. And how they feel, you're going to preserve their emotions and keep them just feeling a general sense of safety. A big part of securing the perimeter is reassuring them and letting them know that you have positive intent and their best interests at heart. All right? This is not your showing your superiority over them. This is not you showing them how smart you are and how dumb they are because you know them so much better than they know themselves. This is not to use as a weapon. This is not to be weaponized or a way to let the other person know how bad they are in any way whatsoever. You have positive intent and you have that individual's best interests at heart. That is the most important component for securing the perimeter. If they know that you are there for them, just like you're fascinated by them, then they will know that they can relax in your presence. And feel free to just say this directly. Feel free to just say, I have positive intent in your best interest at heart. Okay, you don't have to just show up warm and fuzzy. You can look at them and say, I'm doing this to create a win-win. I'm doing this to have a win for you. I want you to understand yourself as well as possible, and I just happen to have knowledge of a really powerful tool, and I really hope that this helps you because I have your best interests at heart. You have to be trustworthy with the precious information that you call, okay? You have to understand and honor and respect that people, even though it's a side door, right? You're asking them things that will sound very innocuous. What do you need a lot of alone time, or do you have a preference for getting your energy by hanging out with people? And we'll get to questions later. But as you're asking these side door questions, and the people are giving you information, they don't know that they're giving you an insight into something very, very deep. They don't know that because you're coming through the side door. But you have to know that, and you have to honor that information. You have to honor that this information, this insight into the other person is precious. And so if you do that, if you come with a mindset of honoring the information and the data you're collecting, then that on a very deeply unconscious level will help them relax in your presence. It's the difference between going to a doctor that you think cares about you and a doctor that just walks in, fiddles around, and then leaves, and you're sitting there for you were there for 40 minutes waiting for them. They came in for 2 minutes. They left for another 40 minutes. They come in for 2 minutes and say that it's okay for you to go. I mean, you just don't feel like you're taken care of in that situation, and that's a mindset. Versus the doctor that sits down with you, hears all your concerns, even if they're totally irrelevant, lets you know that they're here for you, washes their hands before they touch you. all that stuff, right? And and then you feel taken care of, and it's just a mindset, and they don't even have to tell you anything specific. You just know that they care, and that's how you want to be showing up. And that information you're getting from their mind, that's part of what you are showing care for and caution with. Reassure them that you are there to find their genius. All right. That is one of the reasons why we started calling our system the genius styles. A part of it was to ensure that people knew that we were not there to break down their personality type to tell them what was wrong with them. We're there to tell them how they're amazing. Here is how you're awesome. Here's how when you show up in the world in your best, that we all benefit. Here's how you're a gift to the world. All of this language, all of this mind frame and mentality, all of that is very rapport building because they know that you're there to tell them what their genius is. You want to gift them with putting language to the best parts about who you are, who they are. Okay, that's a gift you're giving them. You're showing up to bring value. You're showing up to give them a fully fleshed out explanation of their best self. Okay, so that's very important for you to not only know coming in, but communicate with them, reassure them of that. And request permission, all right? When you have established why you're there, ask them if they're comfortable with the process from the very beginning, all right? If you say, hey, here, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I'm going to look for parts of your mind that are unconscious that you don't have language for. I'm going to be accessing pieces that might be, something that you haven't shared with your closest friends and family. It won't be anything that's a specific piece of content. It won't be a secret. It'll just be parts of who you are. And I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with all of that. I'm here to show you how you're amazing and how you're a genius, and that's my job. However, I just want to make sure that you're cool and that we'll be going down some roads that, you might not have answers for yet because you haven't thought of them. Request permission. You're entering their house. Okay, this is the domain or the home that we travel with. Our minds, our bodies, this is our home. And before you enter somebody's home, you knock and ask permission to enter. And that's what you're doing here. So to build rapport, make sure that you're requesting permission before you enter. All right, so that's the safety component. Let's talk about similarity components. So how do we create rapport with similarities? All right. Well, similarity is the similarity between you and the other person. And even if you're completely opposite personality types, you're still going to have some similarities. So look for ways to relate to them. Look for ways in which you guys are similar or the same. Build rapport, and you don't have to manufacture or lie about it. You don't have to go, oh yeah, I totally grew up in Memphis too, and you've never been to Memphis. Like, you don't have to do that. Just find ways that you can create common ground, and there's almost always some way to create some common ground. And you can also ask them for a 2-minute bio, like just get them to tell you an overview of their life, just a couple minutes, like, okay, so I grew up here, and my parents divorced, and I ended up moving over to this place, and I grew up there, and then I ended up going to college, and I became a journalist and then realized I didn't want to be a journalist, and blah, 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 and whatever their story is, okay? And, of course, you're intrigued and interested for a couple reasons. Number one, this is the beginning of them sharing with you, and so you're already starting to create safety. Two, you can look for ways in which you're similar, okay? You can find ways, and even if you don't communicate, oh yeah, I did that too, you at least know you have similarities, so now you're starting to mirror each other, right? You're starting to get into rapport with them as well. And the third component is they're oftentimes telling you parts of their personality type through those stories, all right? What's important to them, the details they remember, the details they don't remember, the things that they, reached out for in their life. They're also telling you parts of their personality type. So it's like the first entrance you get into typing them, into profiling them with that bio. You'll want to mirror them if they are physically in your presence. Mirroring is an exercise where when a person takes an action, you mirror that action with your own body language. And what's interesting about mirroring is that you would think it would be really, really, really obvious you're doing it, and it never is. All right? It is never obvious. Most people do not catch it at all unless they've been trained in mirroring. And the person will just think they really like you. Seriously, down to little nuances. I pull my hair like this, and the other person puts their hair like that, almost. And as close as you can get to doing it simultaneously, the better the mirroring. And the other person will not notice, and you will be in physical rapport. So that's a great way, if you are physically in their presence, to create rapport. And if you can't do it physically, do it with your voice tone tonality. When they're talking, start talking with the same octave or same range or tonality if you really are struggling to get into rapport with them. You don't have to be fake. You don't have to manufacture something that's not authentic. If the way they're talking is not authentic to you, don't do that. Instead, what you can do is you can help lead them. You can get into enough rapport with them so that if they're anxious and their tonality is anxious, you can match their tonality just long enough to start to lead them into a more calm tonality. It's a bit of a skill. We can talk about that in a bonus if I'm tagging that right now, potentially to talk about the skill of mirroring in a bonus. But we can talk a little bit about how you can lead somebody or guide them into a place where they can adopt your calm state, not just mirror their anxiety if they are anxious. You can tell your story, right? You've asked for their bio. You can tell your bio. Just briefly, your story, how you got into this, where you came from. You're not there to talk about you. You're there to talk about them. So don't spend too much time on you. But you can just share a little bit. A lot of types are they will trust you more if you're willing to share something of yourself. So being willing to share is something that creates not only similarity but also a sense of safety. All right, and then synchronization. So what's synchronization? Well, when you're synchronizing your watches, what are you doing? You're checking to make sure that both your watches are at the exact same time. So synchronization means that you're going to check in regularly. You're going to regularly say, hey, how are you feeling about this? You feeling good? Does this work for you? Are you still okay? Right? Just make sure they're doing okay. This is part of creating safety. You're securing the perimeter. This is part of creating similarity. You're making sure you're both on the same page, and you're synchronizing your tempo. You're making sure that this is all working for the other person and everything feels good, and if it doesn't, then you can work to create a better tempo for the both of you. You avoid or handle rapport breakers. So what are some of the common rapport breakers? The first one is interruption. All right, somebody or something in the context interrupts, and it's your job to keep in rapport by handling that interruption. So if somebody barges in the room, right, and you're profiling someone, it's your job to look at them and say, hey, I'll be with you in just a couple minutes. I'm in the middle of something, so I'm going to have to attend to this, and then I'll get to you later. All right, so you just take over. You're the person who's in control of the context. If somebody tries to come in, it's your job to make sure that you handle or mitigate that interruption, or keep the interruption from happening from the beginning. You post a sign on the doors that says, hey, we're going to be we're going to be in the middle of an interview from this time to this time, so please don't interrupt. Contradictions. All right, so rapport breakers can be contradictions, which are, well, I don't think that's how it goes at all. All right, so now you're no longer in flow and in rapport. Now you are on two sides of an issue, and it's your job to find that middle ground again. So if the person contradicts you, or if you start finding yourself contradicting the other person, that's going to be a problem. So make sure that there's always a perspective you can take where things don't have to be at odds with each other. So look for that. Look for the part, the middle of the Venn diagram. Look for the part where you guys are actually overlapping and how you see things, and avoid those contradictions. Observers, okay? So sometimes people will be watching a profiling process happen. Your job is to not play to the audience, okay? It's not about the people who are onlooking, all right? It's not about the people who are observing, and it shouldn't be about those observers for that person either. So people are, in some situations, it's okay for them to observe, but they have to know that this is not interactive, okay? This is not a team sport. They don't get to kibitz. They don't get if you ask the person a question, an observer goes, answer this because that's what you always do. It's your job to look at the person and say, allow them to answer their questions on their own, because we'll get to a much more authentic place that way. So observers can be there, mates can be there, but it's their job to be quiet, all right? And make sure that you're doing crowd control. Make sure if there are people who are onlooking that you have controlled them, and if you can't, if they won't stop kibitzing, then you kick them out. Any sort of threat. It's your job to handle threats, including threats to their ego. What's a threat to the ego? The threat to the ego is anytime that they think that you're telling them that they're bad. All right. Anytime the ego is receiving messages or information that what they've done or said means that their character is wrong, That's not what that means at all, and you can let them know that. So anytime their ego starts to feel threatened, back off the pedal a little bit, check in, verify, make sure they feel safe, do all that rapport building you did in the beginning, do it again, okay? Do all the same rapport building techniques in order to keep in rapport with them and make sure that they don't have their ego feel threatened. Now, there are some people who are just really sensitive and their egos are going to feel threatened all the time, and just keep building rapport. Just keep making sure that they know that you're there to explain to them how they're a genius and not how they're a bad person. Their time and energy, all right? Rapport breakers are time and energy. I've had people who were tough nuts to crack early on in my profiling sessions that it took a really long time. It took, I think my longest was like 90 minutes to 2 hours to try to figure out somebody's personality type. It took forever. And it was in part because I was young and I wasn't as good at profiling. And it was in part because they were truly difficult to figure out. They were on that bell curve. They were a very, very healthy version of themselves. They had done a lot of personal development work, and they felt very balanced in a lot of different ways, and I just couldn't figure it out. It took me like 90 minutes to 2 hours. Well, at the end of that, I was exhausted, they were exhausted, and it really wasn't a good time for anybody. So managing time and energy is a big part of what you do as well. If it's early days and you are taking a long time to try to figure out somebody's type, then let them know after like 45 minutes or 60 minutes. Check in and be like, hey, are you starting to get tired, or are you cool? Can we keep going? Should we change context? Should we, should we maybe reconvene later? Should we go get something to eat or some water or whatever? So make sure you're managing time and energy, not just for yourself, but also for them. Inappropriate humor. Get a sense for the kind of humor that the different types enjoy. If you don't have your finger on the pulse of that, that's okay. That's not something that you have to do, but make sure that if you are being funny, that your audience appreciates it. This is something that some people have to learn the hard way, like people like me, which is inappropriate humor is one of the fastest things that will throw you out of rapport. So be cautious and careful. Again, you're in their house, all right? This is their home. And if somebody doesn't like a certain item or object in their home, you don't bring it, right? If somebody's really anti-alcohol, you don't bring a six-pack of beer. It's the same thing with thoughts, ideas, concepts, and memes. If you are in their home, you're not going to bring in something that they find to be inappropriate. Really keep your finger on the pulse of confusing speech or jargon. This will be things like technical definitions. We know that you can use the word introverted intuition, perspectives, or NI, and you'll probably be saying all of them interchangeably. What I've noticed is that people usually in just casual conversation with another person who's gone through the system, they'll use the word perspectives. If they're writing it out, they'll use NI because it's faster and a shortcut. And if they need to explain something or ask a question that's technical, they'll use the technical name of introverted intuition. And we just kind of go in and out depending upon the context and the ease of use. Well, if you're profiling somebody for the first time, you're not going to want to use the term NI because they're not going to know what you're talking about. They're going to say, what do you mean NI? So remember that they don't have the same information in their head that you have in your head. So make sure that you're not throwing out confusing words. If you need to use introverted intuition to describe what the function is to them, it's introverted, it's intuitive, so it's pattern recognition, etc. That's great. But it's easier to use the word perspectives if you can. So use the technical piece first to establish it, and then you refer to it as perspectives from that point on. That's one of the easiest ways to go about it. You can do it however you want to, but just make sure you're matching your audience and their ability to keep up with your terms. And when a rapport breaker happens, it's your job to handle it, not the other person's. So you are in command of the situation. You are you're the person that is in front of the orchestra and you're conducting it. Okay, you're the conductor. You're the person that everybody else is looking to make sure that you've got it under control. And so that's a big piece. When somebody's off, right? If the flutist is playing the wrong piece of music, it's the conductor's job to let the flutist know. Okay, so when there's a rapport breaker that happens, it's your job to get back into rapport with your subject. All right, so there's just a couple different things that each of us individually do to create rapport. We usually do it unconsciously. It's usually a part of our charisma. Charisma is fast rapport building generally, and so ask yourself, what do you do normally to create rapport? One of the things that I do is I just make sure that I am very clear about the purpose of the interview. Because for me, I think one of the things that I do that brings charisma to the table is that I truly see everybody as amazing. Even that person who can't stand me, I still see them as an incredible creature. I have a very high value on the preciousness of life. And that's part of the thing that I bring. And so I hammer that in, right? Like, I'm like, hey, I'm here to see how you're precious. I'm here to see how you're amazing. I'm here to see how you are a genius and you're an incredible specimen of humanity. And I just want to know how, right? And I'm very much focusing on that. And that's part of how I maintain rapport with the other person. But ask yourself how you do it. What are the ways that you generally create rapport in day-to-day conversation, and how can you you can really utilize, I don't want to use the word exploit, but really utilize that tool in this context to be able to keep that rapport really sticky. All right, so rapport, very important. Make sure you're building rapport with the person. It's one of the 4 pillars to a good active profiling session. And now we're going to move on to the second portion of the second pillar, which is the interview. Okay, so you've built rapport. Now it's time to get inside their brain. Now it's time to ask those side door questions and really figure out what's going on for them, so that you can, you can do as well or as good a job profiling the other person as possible. All right, so for those, if you're going out for the profiler training certification, the exercise for this session is going to be at the end of the following session, because you're going to need both of them in order to complete the exercise. So if you want to do the exercise for this session, it's going to be woven in with the exercise for the next session.